I'm Randy Ruth, and good morning. Welcome to this edition of Your Pocket Mechanic. This morning we're going to talk about check engine lights. But more importantly, we're going to talk about diagnostic scan tools, which have, over the last few years have become very inexpensive, and a lot of car owners now have one. I want to tell you the good and bad that have come with the ability to have a handheld diagnostic scan tool. Let's get a little background first. What is a check engine light? Well, depending on what kind of vehicle you have, it may say service engine soon, it may say check engine, it may just have a little picture of the outline of an engine. Here's some examples. Regardless of what it says or whatever you call it, in the field we refer to this as a malfunction indicator lamp. MIL. Check engine light is an MIL. If you notice, they're all also amber in color. Most of your warning lights are red. Your brake light, for example, is red. Your engine temperature light is red. That's because they want you to stop the vehicle now because damage could occur. Your malfunction indicator lamp is amber in color, meaning drive with caution that there's a problem, you need to get it fixed. We're going to talk about cars made after 1996 when OBD2 came out. This is onboard diagnostics 2. Prior to that, we had OBD, which came out in the late 70s, early 80s, which was a very crude system that only used a handful of sensors that log trouble codes into an engine control module. The ability to diagnose those back then was difficult, so we didn't have the internet to help understand how they worked. You had to buy a book specific to that car, and they all had different means of retrieving trouble codes. Some had you ground wires, some had you jumper a couple pins together and retrieve flash codes, which didn't mean the same thing from manufacturer to manufacturer. An example is a code 53 on a Chevrolet didn't mean the same thing as a code 53 on, say, a Mercedes, Ford, whatever. In 1996, all manufacturers went to OBD2 with a 16-pin data link connector that looks like this. This 16-pin connector is mounted on the driver's side of the vehicle to where when you open the door at knee level, you can see it under the dash. They also went to a series where they used a 5-character diagnostic trouble code, which began with a letter followed by 4 numbers. It meant the same thing from manufacturer to manufacturer. An example would be, say, a P0170 diagnostic trouble code on a General Motors vehicle. It meant the same thing on a Mercedes, BMW, Nissan, what have you. So they all went to this uniform onboard diagnostic system. They also went to the ability to store what's called freeze frame data. Now, what happens when your MIL comes on is one or more sensors has reported a problem with the emission control system to the powertrain control module. Along with that, it stores what's called freeze frame data. This is all the information that the vehicle saw when the problem was logged. It often includes vehicle speed, whether the engine was idling or not, engine temperature, and so forth. This is very useful information. In the beginning, when OBD2 came out, the diagnostic scan tools are very expensive. Most shops were the only ones that could afford them to read this information. Well, over the last few years, a whole series of handheld scan tools came out like this that are under $100, and a lot of car owners now own one. A lot of parts stores will let you borrow one too. These handheld scan tools only have the ability to read the diagnostic trouble code. They cannot read freeze frame data, which is very useful information. This has caused a whole lot of problems, and I want to share some of these problems with you. A lot of people address a MIL in 2 different ways. Their MIL comes on, they either ignore it because the car runs fine. Other people panic. They want to know what it is and want to address it right now. Whenever your MIL is on, it also means you're going to fail a state smog inspection. So people often want to address this as quickly as possible and as inexpensive as possible. The problem this has is a lot of people will plug in this diagnostic scan tool, retrieve a diagnostic trouble code, and they'll go to the internet and see what it means. They may also go to forums and see what other drivers have done to fix it. This can cause a whole array of problems because people start replacing parts they don't need. I'll give you an example. You plug that in and say you get a P0170. Go to the internet, or some scan tools may even tell you what it means. It'll tell you that the oxygen sensor is stuck reading lean all the time. Someone unfamiliar with cars may think, well, I have a bad oxygen sensor. I'll just replace it. Well, they haven't fixed anything because that wasn't the problem. Now you're out the money for that. A lot of parts stores will lend you a scan tool too to retrieve diagnostic trouble codes. Now let me tell you, parts stores are in the business of selling parts. I have nothing against parts stores. I depend on them very much, in fact. But they're not mechanics. They're parts salesmen. You plug in a scan tool, they're happy to sell you the part that you think you might need. You just spent a whole lot of money you didn't need to. But there's a bigger problem that comes with these handheld scan tools. Remember we were talking about freeze frame data. If you look at the scan tool right here, there's a button that says erase. Now, what some people may do is they plug in, they retrieve the diagnostic trouble code, and they erase it. Well, guess what? They have erased the freeze frame data as well. They can't see freeze frame data. You can't read that with a handheld scan tool. The mechanic needs that freeze frame information. So if you clear that diagnostic trouble code, you clear that freeze frame data, mechanic has nothing to work with. They have to painstakingly, hopefully, be able to pin out the sensor, pin out the system, and visually inspect things to find out what actually turned the light on. This could take several hours. Mechanics charge by the hour. Who pays for that? That's right, you pay for that. And because you've cleared out the information, you're going to pay a lot of money. Do not hit the erase button. These are for information only. Information only. In order to read freeze frame data, you have to have a laptop or a very expensive scan tool. Let me tell you a little more of what happens. The way MIL comes on is the vehicle goes through what's called global trips. A global trip is from a cold start through acceleration, through cruising, deceleration, up to engine operating temperature. During that time, the PCM is looking at all the sensors to see how they're operating, see if they're operating within a given set of parameters. If one or more is operating outside of those parameters, it logs it as what's called a pending diagnostic trouble code. This does not turn the light on yet. This has to happen 2 or 3 times before the light comes on. Now, in between a global trip, you may make a lot of several small trips, so it could take a long time before a light comes on. If you erase that information, if you erase the original code that was in there, it has to start all over again. You make a global trip, the problem's still there, it logs it as a pending trouble code. You continue driving until you make 2 or 3 global trips. Well, if you have to have a smog inspection during that time, and there is a pending trouble code in the powertrain control module, the light may not be on, but you're going to fail the smog inspection. That's right. It has to have 3 global trips without the problem coming back on. Now, there are some failures, like a misfire failure, that'll turn it on the first time it sees it. But a lot of them are what's called 2 or 3 trip failures. What happens is, too, is some people will have a MIL come on, the car runs fine. They hit erase on there and think, hey, I don't have the problem anymore. They continue driving, thinking everything's fine. As I said, it may take 2 or 3 trips before that problem comes back on. And now you have a whole different set of freeze frame data when the light comes back on than what originally caused the problem to begin with. Again, you've skewed a lot of information. So, am I trying to discourage you from buying a handheld scan tool? No, not at all. In fact, I think it's very good to be informed. I think it's wonderful to be informed about your car. What I don't want you to do is hit the erase button. As I said, this is for information only. The handheld scan tool is only meant for your information. To retrieve a code, research it, and when you take the vehicle to a shop, you understand what the mechanic is talking about. So, there's a lot more that goes with it. There's also what's called monitors that have to be reset before a smog inspection. There's quite a bit involved, and I don't want to get into that right there. I just want to give you some basic information on a handheld scan tool. We'll cover a little bit more later. I'm Randy Ruth, and this has been your Pocket Mechanic.